Okay, so we're going to look at our project, The Fractured Still Life. And so what we're going to do is draw a simple still life, fracture it just with a ruler, just drawing lines across, and then shade each shape a value scale from dark to light. And so that's the project in the big picture. So again, a still life, fracture it by drawing lines on the ruler, and then shading each and every shape light to dark. Before I explain exactly how to go about doing this, let me tell you why the project's designed that way. Really what I want us to do is to practice our value scale. So it's not as much about drawing a still life. It's not as much about fracturing an image. It's really about practicing this pencil technique. So as a teacher, I want to get you to draw a value scale, and another value scale, and another value scale, and another value scale, and another value scale. So the objective of this project is to get you to practice this skill over and over. But perhaps just shading these rectangles would be kind of boring. So what I've done is I've designed this project so that you get to do, I don't know, maybe 100 small value scales, but then at the end you also end up with a beautiful piece of artwork. So let's go through this project step by step. So the first thing you're going to do is just draw a simple tabletop still life. And so here's a sample that I've already made up. Now, why a tabletop still life? I'll tell you. Is that I really like sort of these nice, big, simple shapes. I found that if we do other objects, they start getting just too busy. And then when we break them up with a ruler, that suddenly our shapes get too small to put those value scales in. So here I've drawn my tabletop still life. And then the next step is I'm going to take a ruler and I'm just going to break it up. And so there's no real rules about how to break it up. What I like to do is I like to just sort of judge shapes that are easy to go from dark to light. Like this is a nice size. This would be too big. So I like to break it all up. And you can go from edge to edge. You can go from edge just to the edge of an object. You can go through things. You can even skip. Like, so imagine I line this ruler up here. I could draw a line. I could skip through the pair. I could continue on. The only thing that I think you should avoid is don't have too many lines go right through the same intersection. So I'm going to demonstrate. This would be bad. So now I've got 1, 2, 3 lines going through. I kind of call these stars, and I think we're drawn to them because they're a very organized way to put lines through it. Our brains love organization. And there's a moment where they're kind of beautiful, like I think we all love a starburst, but you can see it sort of takes over. So that's something you want to avoid. So since I've made that mistake on this one, I've got one that's ready now. Here's one that's sort of nicely broken up. You know, some large shapes, some small shapes, so I have some variety, but none that are too big or too small, and so I'm going to be able to shade them. So now the next step is to shade them from gray to white and then fill in my dark. So I'm going to demonstrate that, but before I do, I'm going to make one next point. And what that point is going back to all those value scales I showed you, just remember, I want to see you shade from dark to light as many times as possible. With that in mind, that means every shape we can find, like for example, this shape, a shape that's made not just by the apple, not just by the ruler, but any combination. This would be a value scale. This would be a value scale. This. Even inside here, that stem, I could go dark to light, dark to light, dark to light. So you may actually begin to actually lose your picture. And I wouldn't worry about that because again, we're trying to find as many tiny shapes, big shapes, whatever they are. Every shape gets its own value scale. You should never just color over a line. If you're just sort of passing over a line with your pencil, then you're making a mistake. Rather, every time you hit a line, that means you're inside a value scale. So even in what I've highlighted, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So again, I hope that makes sense, but we're trying to find every single shape that we can put a value scale into. So let's pull this out and then talk about that skill then, since this is really what the assignment's about. So what you want to do is find a pencil you like, make sure you have a nice point on it, choke back on the pencil, and then we're going to go from gray to white. And so we're using sort of that tornado pencil stroke. We're feathering out the edge. And the hardest part of this value scale is that transition right here from gray to white. So that's why we want to start with that. Now that I've floated in a gray, I can now build up my dark value. I can float a darker gray into it, and it'll blend beautifully. I won't need to smudge it. So I'm going sort of different directions to hide my pencil stroke. And eventually I can even choke up, get a little more control, and start laying in my deepest, darkest gray. Just like the brain likes those neat stars, but they really don't pay off, our brain, I think, likes the idea of black. It's such a clear concept. And in shading, I think beginner artists really like to start with black and then try to fade it out. And that's a mistake, you know. And again, I think it's because we like to start with concepts that are clear to us, but we really need to start with that light gray. So see how this shape now goes from dark to light? So again, here's another shape. I can go from light, fade it out to white. Look how I've choked way back on my pencil. I'm using that tornado pencil stroke. I'm feathering out to the white, the hardest part. I've laid down a light gray, and now I can begin to darken. It doesn't even take much pressure. And that's the artist in us. The engineer in us probably likes to go black, gray, white. But the artist in us needs to go gray and fade to white. And then slowly build up that dark. And we want to be precise, just like a surgeon. We really want to fill that in exactly. I don't think we'd like to go to a surgeon who said, well, I did the surgery and I got close, right? Artists are the same. We're going to get precise right in there. Look at this small, tiny shape in here. I'm going to give that a value scale. Well, maybe I'll go dark to light this way. Now, these are just value scales, so we're not really shading to make it look 3D. So our light to dark pattern is just random. It's sort of decorative. So don't feel like you have to choose a direction of light and have shading. Rather, we're just practicing our value scales. And we are trying to find as many shapes so we can make as many value scales as possible. So do not ignore a shape. And if your drawing begins to disappear, that's okay. Because again, the objective is to find a way to get as many of these value scales into a drawing as possible. You know, it's not to draw a pear or an apple. That's just sort of a beautiful side effect. Rather, it's to practice our shading technique, and we do end up with a beautiful project. So let's go back through the samples to kind of bring this to a close and analyze it now that we understand. So here's a still life, and you can see they drew an orange and an apple in a bowl, a piece of cheese, and I think this is a pencil. And then they fractured it, and look at each shape was shaded light to dark. Not just the orange, not just the ruler, but just the intersection. Anytime it became a shape. Here's another tabletop still life. This time it's fast food. And so there's a hamburger, French fries, a drink. And again, see this drink cup? It's fractured with a ruler. So this shape was shaded from dark to light. Again, not just the cup shape, not just the ruler shapes, but if by chance they break each other up, you shade that shape. So that's our project, is to practice our pencil technique. And to do that, we're drawing a tabletop still life. Then we are fracturing it, avoiding stars. And then we're shading it from light to dark. But more accurately, we're shading it from gray and fading out to white. And then your last step is you're floating in your darks into that gray. And that's how we're doing our fractured still life.